Tide and Tigers and now Bulldogs. Oh my, the state of Louisiana's 2027 quarterback class, as fantastic as it's been for years now, has a third SEC commit coming into the fold. And it's not because of a new commitment announcement today, but some other news. We'll get to that, as well as some notable updates on some top prospects from around the state. This is Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit That Boot. I'm Jared Roser. He's Sam Spiegelman. He already knows what the heck we're talking about. We'll get into that in a second. But, man, it is August 7th as we record this. High school teams all over the state are practicing. Pads are coming on here shortly. We're going to be talking about jamborees and scrimmages and all that. And one intriguing storyline after another continues to hit the fold, even in terms of just rosters at this time of year. How's it been going, Sam? How does it feel to have things heating up toward another season of high school football?
Yeah, I am. I'm stoked. I just feel like this season is so close. You can kind of feel it. Lately, there's been a lot of transfers. To me, this is preview time of the year. You know that too, Jared. I'm getting ready to release some preseason teams, some preseason rankings. And then you see something like some of these transfers and things that are coming out late, and get you thinking of who can. We're starting to think about the Dome. I already got reservations for New Orleans. I'll be there. I can't wait. It's going to be a fun regular season. There's some great games. Getting to look at the schedule, the teams. I feel like now, and we'll obviously discuss. Maybe we'll have some guests on this month to preview as the season gets kicked off in a few weeks. But it's a lot to consider, and there's a lot of really good contenders out there this year, Jared. I'm super excited. And of course, there's a lot of talent from the 2027 class down to 2030 to be watching.
Yeah, man, it is bonkers how old we're getting and how much time is flying by. I texted my sister-in-law yesterday after I saw the back to school post for my nieces, and they were in little class of t-shirts. And so when I saw the kid that I still call Baby Randy, the first of the trio of nieces and nephews, in a class of 2034 shirt, just a few days after I interviewed class of 2031 talented 8th grade student athletes, and realized how close we're getting to her graduation year being kids that we're talking about here in just a couple years. And so that really hit me pretty aggressively. Something that I just thought about when you mentioned the 2030 class. I texted my sister-in-law and said, man, I just interviewed a 6'1", 215 defensive game changer of the 8th grade from the Zachary Junior Broncos up there, and Baby Randy's only 3 years away from being that. So I can't wait to see all the development she has in store, if she's going to be just a few years behind some of these guys that we're talking about. But let's get in.
And if she's not playing for the Baby Broncos, she'd maybe be interning at Louisiana versus all y'all, so maybe some great experience, and also for Uncle Jared some free labor.
Yeah, we're working on that. I had a conversation Father's Day weekend with them asking, so do you guys like writing stories at all? Do you like taking videos, like talking on camera, doing some video content? And they're a little bit too, I guess, nervous or embarrassed or whatever, too much shame to get in front of the camera and talk, which obviously has not been a problem for us and the nonsense that transpires here at times. But
despite what others may say too, we'll leave it be that as it may.
Let's get into some of these news elements. Let's start with the latest big transfer. It is a national headline grabber. I mentioned now 3 SEC committed quarterbacks in this 2027 class in Louisiana. And we've talked so much through the not just past year, but years about Pop Houston, Elijah Haven, who are committed to LSU and Alabama. Another guy we've talked about, but not quite as much because he'd been out of state, is Colton Nussmeier, the younger brother of now former LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, the son of Saints OC Doug Nussmeier, who had been at Marcus, Texas. Today, the news official and out there that he will be playing his senior year in Metairie at Archbishop Rummel. Add another great player to this 27 class around the state, another great player to what is a more open Catholic League race than it's been in the past few years. And so what do folks that hadn't watched Colton as much the last few years, need to know about this new quarterback for the Raiders that comes in as a Georgia Bulldogs commitment.
Yeah, him and Garrett, even though they're brothers, and both are great kids. I've had the pleasure of getting to know the whole Nussmeier family over the years, and sister is engaged to former first round pick, LSU great, Neville great, Will Campbell. They're just a terrific family. They're a football family. They're easy to root for. Garrett and Colton are different kids, different quarterback styles, throw with different arms. Nussmeier always, Garrett, the elder Nussmeier, always had more of a aggressive style, wanted to push the ball downfield, take chances, gunslinger mentality, could always escape the pocket. And I think, they do overlap in that capacity. Colton is a dual sport athlete. He's a fantastic basketball player as well. Unfortunately, injuries kept him away for his junior seasons. We'll see if he plays for the Rummel basketball team. I'm not sure if he's going to graduate early or not, which usually doesn't really happen at Rummel. So it'll be great. He also has an arm, obviously, to extend the field, but he's a playmaker with the ball in his hands. He can run, and when you look at Rummel, with the Tulane running back commit out there, with a big, really talented offensive line that's going to give Colton the opportunity to get back. Listen, Rummel doesn't have an Easton Royal or an Ahmad Hudson on their offense, but they have playmakers who are going to challenge for all district. They've made it to the state championships with guys like David Hensley and such on this roster. They've also done it with guys like Jamar Chase. I think with a bona fide playmaking, careful, accurate quarterback like Colton Nussmeier, obviously he's committed to Georgia. He possesses a lot of high athletic traits, and he's coming off a season where he really he only played in 5 or 6 games because of the injury. I feel like he left a little bit of meat on the bone and what he really is capable of doing. But he's been really focused in because he didn't get to play basketball season. He's been in the film room. When I got to see him at Elite 11, he looked sharp, especially for the first time throwing since a serious leg injury that required, I believe, off-season surgery. And then he played in the Sevens tournament, I believe it's called, out in IMG a few weeks ago. And I think he was the MVP of that from rivals, from multiple outlets, including the host outlet named him the game MVP at quarterback. I think he's got that skill set. I think he sees the field really well. That usually translates from basketball to quarterback. I'm excited because Rummel, besides Chandler Fields, besides Chase Forcade, when they have a quarterback, they have been terrific. And I think he bolsters an offense that was already going to ground and pound the ball. That's what Nick Monica's going to do. And they're going to have a fantastic defense. So this makes them from a contender to a really strong contender, not only in the Catholic League, but as this team gels going into the state playoffs.
Super interested to see what this does in terms of how much we see that offense pass compared to some recent years. They still have the running back duo with Hawkins and Terrence, Jaden Terrence that you mentioned before, the Tulane commit, who is a really dynamic weapon they can do a lot of different things with. He's a killer on special teams, can catch the ball, so you can move him around quite a bit. And so a really nice duo there. And you mentioned they've got some solid receivers. It's just not an Easton Royal on that team in terms of the wide receiving core, but
not many do.
Yeah, for real. In any given year, really, as fantastic as Easton has become. But Shesby, Cade, some of those guys at wide receiver. I really like the young athletic tight end Jamarcus Jones, who is another one of those basketball, football, multi-sport athletes. But one thing about Colton that when we talk about the differences with him and Garrett, when there was so much attention paid to Garrett at LSU and, him not being the most fleet of foot and going to make big plays with his legs. And then anytime he did, the excitement level of the Nuss bus taking off in the open field, I don't think anyone was more tickled by that than Colton, who consistently reminded Garrett how much better of an athlete he was overall, particularly on the move there, but you see his escapability and his ability to hurt you with his legs when things break down or when you kind of lose track of that aspect, on top of the fact that Garrett told us for years how much better he felt like Colton was spinning the ball that he did at that same age. And so there's a lot of reasons certainly for Rummel fans to be excited about this edition. I mean, a Georgia commitment says quite a bit. We haven't had a ton of those come through the state of Louisiana in recent years. And so
the last being the great Cedric Van Pran, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I was trying to remember years earlier because Andrew Lopez texted me and asked, was this the first local?
No, he should know. The kid, Chigbu from Holy Cross.
He asked if it was the first since Chigbu, and I was like, well, I think Berga Van Pran was a couple years after that, and then obviously this wouldn't be New Orleans local, but Major Burns signed there before transferring back.
And so did the kid from U-High, the safety linebacker, who then played receiver.
Micaiah Tongue,
yeah.
Anyway, we're go ahead.
And the East Sean Washington, I think, signed with Georgia out of high school.
Yeah, and so we're effectively way off track now, just naming former Georgia Bulldog signees. But I think we've kind of covered the bases there. We've called him for years Baby Nuss, except now he's a 6'3" and a half senior quarterback, and so he's not really Baby Nuss anymore. He's one of the stars of this Louisiana 2027 class, going to be, depending on who you're looking at, a top 10 or 20 prospect in the class now, and someone that has a chance to change the complexion of that Catholic League race that is more wide open than it's been in a couple years. Rummel had a lot of really nice pieces back on both sides of the ball, and so it's going to be interesting to watch them in that conversation with the Carrs and Augs and Curtises and company on down that list into the rest of what is always a league marked by parity. But let's talk some about another guy in that league that we mentioned a couple of times already in here, the Brother Martin star receiver, Easton Royal, who I joked with you last episode that you're kind of on like a Anchorman Panda Watch style daily updates of Easton Watch. And there has felt like more optimism, confidence, if you want to say it, that LSU continues to put itself in a positive situation as we now turn the calendar to August with a still Texas committed Easton Royal, but more and more smoke seemingly from a media standpoint coming out in purple and gold with some of these daily updates. What is your latest take on Easton and what fans need to be watching as his senior season approaches?
Yeah, I think, and you know what, going into September, I expect him to still be committed to Texas and possibly even into October. Easton Royal has as I've been reporting in the last couple of weeks, this timeline has shifted. I think that he would have liked to have maybe either shut his recruitment down or potentially flipped and either way been 100% before his senior season at Brother Martin. But ultimately, he was not lying when he said this was too close to call. Like, he didn't feel good going, sticking with shutting the door on any schools. Let's put it that way. And he's going to take this into the season. I mean, obviously he knows what Texas is going to bring to the table. He's been committed there since November. He's been there half a dozen times, including his final official visit, and he's going to be there next month for the biggest game of their season. He's also going to see them in November when they're in Baton Rouge. In Baton Rouge and in Gainesville, there's two coaches that he's very close with that are recruiting him very hard. John Sumrall is someone he said is probably the coach that he has the closest relationship with, dating back to his very successful run at Tulane. And Lane Kiffin, as I've reported, has taken a excessively big step to involve himself in Easton's recruitment leading into his official visit, and especially in the last couple of weeks as we head into the season. Lane Kiffin wants Easton Royal to be an LSU Tiger and is recruiting him as such. They're going to be aggressive. So is Florida. And I think that Texas was obviously hoping that they would get Royal to stick a pin in his recruitment and publicly shut down his recruitment. Easton wants to see what these new offenses look like in Florida and in LSU. He wants to go see what Texas is going to look like this season, because Texas their roster looks like they're going to contend for an SEC championship and a national championship this year. So if Easton might see, there's a thought in Austin that the longer this goes, this could work in the Longhorns' favor. But ultimately, in my opinion, there's a lot of mounting confidence in LSU, and that's been a theme since the spring, since the summer. And then now going into his senior season, there's a sense that LSU is trending toward eventually getting this flip done. It's very hard for elite players like Easton to leave the state when they're so coveted. Few have been able to do it, and we're not ruling out the possibility that he's a Longhorn or even a Gator. But ultimately, I believe that LSU has positioned themselves best to flip him if they can.
When you mention you won't be surprised if September hits, if October hits, and so on, and he's still committed to Texas. We talked last episode about some of the challenges and dynamics of an LSU perspective of, at some point, do you have to start putting more of your eggs in a different basket and really, particularly in the modern world where you have to be allocating funds and having some of those conversations, how long can they kind of let something like this drag out? It seems like LSU is more in this down, like regardless of how down to the wire it needs to go, that Easton has taken that kind of a priority here.
Yeah, I think listen, they need a wide receiver. They need a high school. They have 3 committed in Braylon, Gary, and Cooper, Cade Cooper from Pennsylvania. And they have always eyed a 4 receiver class this year, especially with how great the state is. They could go in another direction. They could recruit if a senior is having a good senior season. They could dial up the push. They could offer someone, but they want Easton Royal. They believe he is a fit in multiple capacities on this offense. And they know that whether they get Easton Royal or not, they're going to add, whether they need 1 or 2 or et cetera, receivers in the transfer portal. They're going to be aggressive. They believe Easton can play right away at LSU. So if they invest in Easton Royal, then they only have to invest in 1 transfer portal wide receiver. If not, they're going to need 2. That's just the nature of this game if they're going to compete. So I think that they're willing. I think this could linger. My guess is October, but I could see it going into November as well.
The guy that started the really hot summer trend early on with the LSU commitments, Ahmad Hudson, the Ruston tight end, continues to be in the news as well. He's someone that is committed to LSU, but rivals, obviously, with a report just a couple of days ago with a quote from Ahmad of, the program you wouldn't expect to be doing their job to try and get me to come here is doing what they need to do. The program you most expect it from is not doing what they need to do, when he talks about the communication dynamics of LSU versus Nebraska. What's your latest read on Ahmad? And on a scale of 1 to 10, essentially, how concerned should LSU fans be? I know there was some concerns at one point early in the summer when he was still going to take a visit at Nebraska. Now you have some comments coming out here at the back end of the summer, heading into senior year. Still Nebraska in the mix there, at least in terms of conversation. Just simply as that, how concerned should LSU fans be about some of this latest?
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to point out that those were not comments made to me in an interview. When I caught up with Ahmad last month, he inferred that his recruitment was all but shut down, but he's not closing any doors just yet. And when you hear about the comments that about, one school is not recruiting me as well as the other, I don't think he's talking about the football side of things. My intel suggests that LSU is in a fantastic spot with Ahmad, especially from a football standpoint. Lane Kiffin, Joe Cox, J.R. Belton, Charlie Weiss Jr. These guys have been recruiting them since they've been at LSU. This started leading into his state championship game. They've stayed they've stayed in touch since. Obviously, they yielded an early commitment in May before his official visits. J.R. Belton offered him after his after his first start game at Ruston. We saw him a week later in City Park. That relationship.
Playing a game at Tad Gormley, to specify, we weren't hanging out with ninth grade Ahmad in City Park in New Orleans. They were playing Jesuit.
Yes, we didn't just happen to see Ahmad and Ahmad Bro and hang out with Coach Baugh in City Park. They were playing Jesuit. I thought it was implied when I said first Jesuit. Anyway, now that we clarified that, JR has been a part of this recruitment. Joe Cox recruited him at Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin loves this kid, much like Easton believes this is like the next trade as Green. And look how we're going to use this Mackey Award nominee or preseason watch list rather. Having said that, Fred Hoiberg and this Nebraska staff have done a great job, and Matt Rule and their staff have been very aggressive with Ahmad. Listen, I don't know if he's going to, in fact, make another visit to Nebraska. I personally would, in my opinion, would say it's unlikely. I know he's left the door open to do that, but as you know, they have a gauntlet of a schedule. They're playing Carr, they're travel, they're playing all across the state. They have big games on Friday night, and to get to Nebraska, it's going to have to be a night game because it's a lot of intense travel from Ruston, Louisiana. That's kind of been the barrier in the past. So we'll see what happens. Here's what I do know is he'll be in Tiger Stadium week 1 when Clemson's there. That's confirmed and reported. That's for me. There's a lot of confidence that not only has Lane Kiffin and that staff done well on the football side, but Will Wade. Because listen, I don't truly understand the basketball recruiting super well, but I believe Ahmad is still a junior in the basketball sense, where he's like a little bit more of an underclassman. But there is going to be an effort made from Will Wade and the staff to make noise over these last couple of months. And I guarantee, as we have seen in the past on this beat, we've seen Will Wade at a lot of games in Tiger Stadium. Ahmad Hudson will be there September 5th. Don't be surprised if there's a picture of the two of them on Instagram a few hours later.
Yeah, worth noting that that quote that I was referencing at the beginning was from one of y'all's Nebraska reporters, and so the context there for fans is important to keep in mind that Ahmad is saying that to a Nebraska reporter. As far as the basketball side, the dynamic of Hoiberg and company up there being more involved and more active is certainly notable, because that was a big difference maker for Ahmad when he announced his commitment to LSU. He has been throughout very adamant that he is playing both sports in college, and he had sort of a plan in place and an affirmation that was going to be possible in purple and gold. He said, Will Wade might have been more excited by the announcement than he himself was to make the announcement, that was a big part of that conversation. And so Nebraska pushing there on the basketball side a little bit more in recent months is certainly interesting. And you're right, in terms of the recruiting class dynamics on the basketball side, there are only a few members of this year's LSU basketball team that are publicly known and announced. And so in terms of finalizing just the 26-27 basketball roster, right, Will Wade and company still waiting here to make some announcements soon and fill out that roster, let alone what's ahead, obviously, for 27 and beyond. But Ahmad Hudson's one of the top prospects, not only in the state, but in the country. And so we'll be watching that throughout this season, as will folks, it sounds like, in Nebraska. Most of this 27 Louisiana class, certainly amongst, top prospects, FBS bound guys, we've said it for a while now, we know where they are currently committed. They've made public announcements. A couple that we don't have announcements from: Westgate safety Karan Eugene, Zachary wide receiver Ethan Kimmey, the two highest ranked rising senior prospects in the state. Any read on those guys, and if there's momentum on the potential of some clarity in their recruiting processes at the moment, or is that something that's still pretty hazy with just a few months left?
I think there's going to be a lot to be sorted out with both. Karan Eugene has kept open communication with LSU, with A&M, Ohio State, University of Houston. but he's got to get some things behind scenes sorted out. So it's a matter of if, and then it's a matter of when. So hopefully being at Westgate, that transfer will help him get things in order, but that's still a work in progress. We'll see if he makes some visits this year along the way. He could always end up somewhere else in state and see what happens. Kimmy is someone that is one school really keeping a close eye on them is Florida State, which is preparing to be very active in Louisiana. Already has a commitment from Jaden Miles, but they've been very active in keeping Kimmy warm. He really impressed in the camp. They just kind of want to see what his senior season looks like. So we'll see if any other schools also take notice of Ethan Kimmy as he starts his senior season at Zachary.
We started with a transfer. We'll wrap up with a transfer and dip down into that 2028 class that we're starting to see really move into more of the forefront now that so many of these 27 commitments are public. Caiden Bellard, All-State Lafayette Christian running back, will now be alongside or behind Knox Kiffin in that U-High backfield. The news coming out last week that Caiden would be moving to Baton Rouge, or had moved to Baton Rouge and was now at U-High, which has added an awful lot of talent this offseason to a team that obviously always has title aspirations and always has kind of a target on itself for some chirping from some other fan bases and whatnot around the state. And it's going to be loud this year. I texted Coach a week ago and said, I'm just going to make you a mixed CD of 26 tracks of Ed O saying block out the noise, because y'all are going to have a lot of noise to be blocked out this year. But
you can actually pay Coach O on that app, and he will just say it for you over FaceTime.
He doesn't even need to do. I mean, at U-High, he can just stop on his morning jog.
Yeah, he would just do it if you asked him.
But Caiden Bellard is a guy that has LSU offer Ohio State. That list goes on. He's a member of this 2028.
Indiana, Michigan, Alabama, USC, Ole Miss.
This 2028 running back class in Louisiana that I continue to feel like has the chance to be as good as any that has come through when you consider Caiden, Dalen Powell, the Ash duo of Williams's, DJ Neal at Franklin Parish, Lucas Owens up at Minden. The list goes on and on. But what type of an addition is this for U-High as they gear up for this season as a contender back in D3 select? And what does this mean from a recruiting standpoint to you? He was one of the first prospects in this class to pick up an LSU offer. Now he's on LSU's campus right there. How much of a boost can that be for them as they try to figure out what their 28 running back class looks like there on the other side of campus?
Yeah, if you talk to coaches around the state, and I would say since the spring, Caiden Bellard is probably the back in the 28 class that most coaches think might be the best. And it's a really special group between him and Noble and Dalen, 3 national prospects. And like you said, it goes even deeper than that, of course. But those guys being the national guys, there's a case for Caiden Bellard, who this season is going to have a really great offensive line that transfer from Derek Hooker, who's going to be a nationally touted offensive tackle. Knox Kiffin, who's obviously an SEC offered quarterback. They're gonna be quite ferocious this season, those Cubs. I'm very excited about them. But from a recruiting standpoint, it's very early for Caiden. I think LSU has put itself in a good spot, and proximity does not hurt for a kid that is high on LSU and is going to be in town week 1 for the game. But he is still open at this point. He has game day visits set to Florida, to Miami, to Indiana, to Michigan, to Arkansas, to Ole Miss. I'm forgetting a few, but there's some heavyweights in there. He is still open at this point, but if LSU continues to recruit at the pace that they are, they're going to be in a good spot with him. And I think they're also in a great spot with Dalen Powell, who currently is ranked, I believe, as the top running back in the state.
And for folks that are interested by all these new faces and new places, week 1, September 4th, U-High versus Rummel. You get the Knox Kiffin versus Colton Nussmeier quarterback battle. Caiden Bellard on the field there. Some great talent in that one. It's going to be a really, really fun week one around the state of Louisiana with some huge, not just in-state matchups, but Curtis going against North Shore, teams playing some top competition from neighboring states. And so an awful lot of reason to be excited right off the bat with some great matchups that are now less than a month away. So get ready.